great that you're here. My name is Ruth Cross and I'm one of Usdaws Equality Officers, and we look after Usdaws campaign on mental health. So the focus for tonight is on supporting the emotional well-being of children and young people. We're very conscious that most Usdaw members are going out to work with looking after children, looking after grandchildren, and that even when the going is good, is not always an easy juggling act. And as we're all very much aware, the 18 months have been really difficult for a lot of children and young people. And so we really hope that this webinar will support you in the juggling act that you're doing. I think there's times as parents or as grandparents when we all might feel worried about our kids. We're not sure whether they're okay. We're not sure whether the behaviour that they're exhibiting is something that we need to be concerned about. We might be trying to find ways to talk to our children and young people, and we're not sure how to do that. So we hope that tonight will give you some practical strategies for supporting your child's emotional well-being or the well-being of children that you're involved in caring for. Before I go on and introduce our speaker colleagues, just a few practicalities, the sort of standard Zoom practicalities just to run you through. So we've put everybody on mute just to make sure that there's no sort of echo and feedback. If you want to keep your camera on, that's really great. It's nice to see your faces, but if you don't want to have your camera on, that's absolutely fine. Don't feel that you've got to keep your camera on. Please feel free to ask questions of our speaker. If you want to ask a question, you need to put that in the chat function. I hope everybody's okay with how to use chat on Zoom. On a computer, on a laptop, which is what I'm on, it's down at the bottom. But if you can post your question in the chat, we'll do our very best to put those questions to our speaker, and I'll explain a little bit more about how questions are going to work. I think just a couple of other things to mention before I introduce our speaker colleagues. One is that Jude will be sharing slides with us this evening, which will have a lot of really great practical information on. Don't feel that you need to scribble down what's on those slides, because we're really happy to share those with you after the event, and information will be mailed out to you, so don't feel you've got to scribble furiously. The webinar is going to last for just over an hour or so, and we are recording it so that reps and members who haven't been able to make it this evening will be able to watch the event at their leisure, and we'll make sure you all get a copy of the recording. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker now, and it gives me really great pleasure to introduce Dr. Jude Jockin. Jude is a child and educational psychologist who has worked extensively with schools and local authorities to support children's emotional and behavioural needs. Jude has a wealth of experience at helping children and young people to develop good mental health, and in helping parents and families to find practical ways to support their children. So I'm really delighted that Jude is here with us, and without further ado, I will hand over to you. Thank you so much, Jude. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Ruth. I'm just going to adjust my screen. There we go. Thank you. And thank you for everybody signing up to tonight. As Ruth mentioned, we had a really large number of sign-ups, which really highlights how important this topic is to everybody. So my name's Jude Jockin. Ruth's done a great job of introducing me. I'm a child and educational psychologist. I'm currently sat just south of Manchester in my comfy clothes, in jogging bottoms and a t-shirt. It's one of the advantages of being behind the screen, to be honest. I don't know where everyone else is, but autumn well and truly hit Manchester. I think it was on Monday. Got wet feet doing the school run on Monday, which wasn't fun for the day. Just a little word of warning from my end. Apart from being a psychologist, I'm also a mum. I have a recently turned 7-year-old who generally will go to bed well, and I have quite a feisty and fiery 4-year-old. Last time I did this presentation, he took he took exception to the fact that I wasn't doing bedtime and bath time and barged in and insisted that I come off the computer. So if we have a little unwelcome, cute visitor, just excuse me and I'll deal with that for a minute. It has been warned today, and bath time is being covered. I'm just going to mute somebody because I can hear a little bit of background feedback. There we go. Oh, so like I say, thanks for joining me. My name's Ju Jockin. So I primarily work in schools, local authorities. I do some work for the courts as well across the city of Manchester. I was in Cheshire today, though, down in Crewe. So I cover the Greater Manchester region, and it's my job to go into schools, work with teachers, nursery staff, parents, carers, and young people, children and young people themselves. And it's my job to identify where there's barriers to learning and advise the school and families on what those barriers are. Sorry. And one of my big roles is to support mental health and emotional well-being within the context of school. But it's really important that emotional health is supported both within the context of home and the context of school, hence why we're here today. So I know obviously a lot of you will be parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles. And as Ruth very articulately said, I'm guessing people have signed up today because the topic matters to them. What can I do in my role as a parent, grandparent, carer to give my son, daughter, grandchild, etc., or family member the best possible advantage moving forward in terms of supporting their emotional health? What can I say? What can I do? What do I not say? What do I not do? So in that sense, I'm hoping that this session is going to be quite a practical session, full of strategies, advice, food for thought, that once this session is finished, you can begin to put into practice. It's pitched so it's an accessible and everyday piece of advice and piece of training. So bear with me, I'm just going to shuffle my screen about. Sorry, one last point. As Ruth said, do put any comments or questions in the chat facility. I'm going to be shrinking the Zoom, so there's just going to be a little box, so I won't have access to anything because I'm on my presentation, but Ruth towards the end will be reflecting those questions back to me. So just a couple of seconds while I shuffle stuff about. Okay, 1 second. Right, screen. Okay. Ruth, I can see you. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can just see my presentation? Great. So just my presentation and me, that's what should be seen. Is that right? Great. Okay. 1 second. Okay. Right. So like I say, we've had so many sign-ups. Wow, we've got 117 people here today, which is brilliant. So once again, thank you all for joining us. So without further ado, let's start focusing. So how to support at home. So like I said, the focus is on emotional well-being. What can I do in my role as family or caregiver to support the young person, the person that I love, the person that I care about, with all things emotional well-being and mental health? A lot of us have had an up and down last, oh gosh, however many months COVID and lockdown has been. So we've all had to adapt radically to change. And with our children and our young people, it's been a very different journey. As adults, we've obviously had to adapt. Your jobs have probably felt very intense, I'm guessing at times, very anxiety provoking at times. You've very much been on the front line. So thank you from where I'm sitting today. Thank you for your role in that. But for our children and young people, it's been a really different time for them. They've been in lockdown, out of lockdown. Some of them would have been in the small groups. Some of them would have been behind a screen for a while. Some of them would have gone into school here and there. Some of them would have had a good educational offer. Some of them would have had a restricted educational offer. Some may have loved it. I've met many a pupil who've actually thoroughly enjoyed the peace and the quietness and the distance from all the social interactions that lockdown has brought, whereas others have just been really intent on heading back to school to get some normality. I can hear somebody is. Could we just mute? Sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback. Hang on. Okay, I think that person's muted. Okay. Sorry, I forgot where we're up to. We were talking about that some children have
directly respond to her.
No, it's Jo Bird that I can see her screen flashing up. Bless her, she's not on mute.
Sorry.
Okay. Is that better? Great. Sorry about that. I was just hearing some feedback there. I was talking about the up and so for some pupils or some children and teenagers, they've had an okay time. Some people have had a great time. Some people have had a really rubbishy time, and it's varied for different individuals, the whole experience. Aside from COVID and lockdown and everything else, what's really happened in recent years, I'd say around the last 4 years, is there's been a much more sharper focus on mental health. And there's there's a really big narrative now of it's actually okay not to be okay. And we all have a mental health. There's now a really big recognition of how important that is, and how vulnerable it can be at time. So we're sat here in a time where there's a real openness, or we're moving towards a real openness around all things emotions and mental health, which is really pleasing. I'm very much seeing it much more reflected in my work with the teenagers. The teenagers, I think, are increasingly got good knowledge of anxiety and depression, how to look after their physical health and how to look after their emotional health as well. It doesn't apply to everybody, but I'm noticing as schools begin to give a bit more information and it okayizes, so it normalizes emotional well-being, I'm noticing that conversations are opening up, which is really pleasing. Okay, so just moving on. So the first half of this session is a general overview of stress and anxiety. With an increase in awareness of stress and anxiety and all things emotions comes an increase in questions. So questions that I largely get from families are, I recognize my child is stressed. I recognize that my child is anxious. What can I do? Is this helpful? I was with a parent on Monday whose son is currently a school refuser. Things have just got really hard for the lad, and school is completely an overwhelming experience for him, and he's not currently attending. And the parent very much feels stuck between a rock and a hard place. What do I do? What's the right thing to do? What's the right thing to say? And that can feel quite a stuck position to be in. And I'm hoping today addresses some of that. So like I say, as we increase our awareness of stress and anxiety, we increase our questions as well. And the second half is going to provide you with an understanding of how you can help your child, your son and daughter, like I said, in an everyday and accessible way. I predict we're not going to stick to the hour. I've never done this session in an hour. Apologies for that. Like Ruth said, it's been recorded. You will get the slides. Don't feel bad if you need to go at any point. That's absolutely fine. You'll get all the information you need. So let's have a move on. Okay, so why emotions matter. So we know generally what an emotion is: happy, sad, scared, fearful, excited. But why do they matter? It's actually something that we often don't think about. We know we feel these emotions. We might go into work, we might have an emotional experience. I feel happy, I feel okay, I feel calm, I feel anxious, I feel stressed. And our emotions can fluctuate throughout the course of the day. Exactly the same for our kids as well. So they might be going into school, they might feel happy going into school, they might feel apprehensive. They've got literacy, they've got science, they've got PE. It's perfectly normal for our emotions to go up and down throughout the course of the day. But why do they matter? So firstly, emotions impact our attention, our memory, and our learning. So if you can think of an example whereby you felt very stressed or very anxious, it often feels a bit foggy, a bit heavy. And often I hear, I can't really express how I feel. I can't see the wood through the trees in that sense, because if we're feeling strong, negative, and in some instances, strong, positive emotions, it can take our attention away. A lot of our attention is focused on our emotions, trying to work through that at that point in time. That can make it really difficult for our children and young people to be able to focus in a classroom. I came across a young girl yesterday, so she is 8 years old, various levels of difficulties going on in the background, but first and foremost, really, really high levels of anxiety. She's very much a capable little thing, without doubt she is, but significantly under attaining. So she's currently in year 3, she's attaining at a year 1 level, which is 2 years behind. Capability is not an issue. She's got the capability to do it. She suffers from really high levels of anxiety. For her, she sat in a classroom. She sat worried about the work, worried about what the teacher's going to say. What will happen if I get it wrong? Will people laugh at me? What will they say? For her, her learning, her attention, her memory, and her learning is impacted because the fog of the anxiety is coming down. And it's the same with other strong negative emotions, whether it's fear or whether it's anxiety, whether it's grogginess, whether it's distress, whatever the strong emotion is, like I say, it can get in the way of our attention, our memory, and our learning. I'm sure we've all had really, really quite stressful periods of life, almost traumatic periods, or really excitable periods, and we can't actually recall the facts. And again, it's our brains just not fully processing all the information, because a lot of our brain is taken up with the emotion. The second one is the role that emotions play in our decision making and our judgment. I'm sure, and I include myself in this, when we're feeling strong feelings, we tend to make decisions or judgments based on that. So, for example, if you think of, you might be on your way to work, the kids are playing up on the way to school, you've forgotten their lunchbox, swimming kit, pencil case, whatever it is for the day. Then there's a real bad traffic jam. You walk into work and you've got a moany customer to deal with. It can take a lot of your energy. It can impact the decisions that you're making right there, right then in your head. And it's the same for our children and our young people as well. When we're coming from a heightened emotional place, whether we're feeling a strong negative emotion or we're feeling very anxious, it can impact the decisions we make. So, for example, take the young girl, let's call her Katie, who I met yesterday. She might know the answer. She will be knowing the answer to the questions in the classroom. Is she going to put her hand up and have a go when she's coming from a place of feeling very anxious? Absolutely not. She's not. She's going to sit back and she's going to be focusing on that level of distress that she's feeling as well. So in that sense, her level of anxiety is impacting her willingness and her decision to have a go in the classroom. The third one is the role that our emotions play in our relationships. I've got a really interesting example from, again, this week. So I met a teenager, lovely lad, year 8, relatively straightforward background, but with some bumps in the road here and there. And over time, things have just happened really over time that have impacted the relationships that he has with mum, that he has with dad, and that he has with grandparents. As a result, he feels quite angry about that. As a result, when people interact with him, he really reacts. You could probably, from an outsider looking in, you'd say, yeah, that's a bit of an over the top reaction. It's a bit of an aggressive reaction. From him, he's coming from a place of just feeling unheard and unlistened to. So he just reacts. What he's done over time is he knows he's overreactive. So he's pulled away from the family. He's spending more and more time in his bedroom. And over time, relationships have pulled apart. He's coming from a very kind place doing that, because in his head, he's thinking this relationship, for a number of reasons, feels very different to what it did before. I feel angry about that. Every time I communicate with you, there's a chance that I'm going to lose it and I'm going to snap at you. That leads us to clash. I don't want to feel like that because I get in trouble for it and I know it upsets you and it affects our relationship. So I'm going to pull away from that. So really what's going on there for him is quite a high level of anger underneath at various things which have happened. So that's just going to take time to unpick. But our emotions can really get in the way of our relationship quality. I'm sure we've all come across a colleague at work who's just really good company and always good to have a bit of a chat to, a bit of a natter. They make you feel nice. They're just enjoyable company. The chances are, if you see them on the corridor or about here and there, you're going to want to connect because it's comfortable. It feels okay. Turn that on its head. You might have a colleague or a family member or somebody that you experience in life who just is the relationship's difficult. It always ends up in a bit of tension and a little bit of fraughtness. Are you going to approach that person without absolute necessity? I don't, to be honest. I tend to do the whole British thing of let's just avoid that person. And that means that relationship quality is impacted. So we can see how our emotions can get in the way of relationships as well. Okay, emotions impact our physical and mental health as well. So very much strong feelings, especially the unpleasant feelings. So the feelings of feeling scared, feeling fearful, of feeling angry can really impact our mental health over a period of time. Also, these strong negative emotions can impact our physical health. I don't know if you've ever gone to bed feeling quite anxious, quite angry, quite apprehensive. For me personally, it does affect my sleep. The next day, it can affect how we view the world. The next day, it can affect our diet, how willing we are to engage in exercise. So there's a big link between emotions, especially the unpleasant emotions, and the impact that has on our physical health and our mental health as well. And the final point is the impact that emotions have on creativity. So in order to achieve the big goals or complete, in the instance of our children and our young people, a class project, a bit of coursework, a performance, we have to be willing to put ourselves in a position where we might get negative feedback, where we might be on stage. And that takes quite a lot of guts as well. That takes a level of courage. If we're not in that emotional place where we're in a position to receive that negative feedback or in a position to feel quite exposed, we tend to hang back a bit. And in that sense, it can dampen our creativity and our aspirations as well. It means we want to just come back to that safe place, because right here, we feel safe. It's predictable. It's comfortable. We know how to relate to that person. We know how to relate to this job or that piece of coursework that we need to do. Because like I say, it feels safe and comfortable when we're coming from an anxious place or a place from low mood. When we're feeling more confident and more buoyant and more energized as well, we're more willing to take risks. We're more willing to put ourselves out there. Again, it can impact our effectiveness at school and work and our levels of creativity. Okay, so we've looked at why emotions are important. In short, when we're feeling calm and in control and quite settled, then the above can be achieved. We're able to attend, we're able to memorize. We tend to make good quality judgments. We feel quite connected to people, relationships feel good. We're willing to engage in creative topics. When we've got the strong negative emotions, the anxiety and the anger and the stress, these can act as blockers for the above, and they can prevent us, not all the time, but frequently they can prevent us from feeling connected to others, to learning and to achieving, and ultimately being the best versions of ourselves. So we're just going to have a quick look at stress. So stress, anxiety, and then how we can help. I'm just going to get a sip of water. Okay, so stress. So stress can cause changes in the chemicals in our body. So stress is the first stage, you probably heard, of the fight or flight response. So when our body feels stressed, it almost presses the button, releases all the hormones in our body for the fight, flight, and freeze. The fight is we might feel a bit pent up, a bit angry, a bit ready to fight. It goes back to caveman instinct. If you saw a big hairy mammoth coming towards you, you might fight, you might get your spear out and want to stab at it. It's the same in the modern day, but there's no more hairy woolly mammoths hanging about, but we still get that fight reaction. Not all the time. Some of us might get the flight reaction. I just want to hide. I just want to cocoon. I just want to go away. I just want to retreat to a place of safety. And for some of us, we might enter into the freeze mode, which is just freezing, not knowing what to do. We may find that we're lost for words. We don't know how to react. So stress is the first button to be pressed on the fight or flight response. If stresses aren't adapted to, they can impact negatively on us over a course of time. So some stress is completely normal. The vast, if not everybody, will encounter a level of stress at some point in their life. Most people will encounter a level of stress on a weekly, if not a daily basis. It goes up and it comes down and it bobs along. It's when it's at a constant high and impacting negatively on our lives, or our children and young people's lives for a longer period of time, that it begins to impact emotional well-being, and then ultimately it could impact mental health as well. So what are the signs of stress? So can't sleep in, get into bed later than usual. This is for our children and young people. Seeming fatigued or down or disengaged, saying they're tired all the time. I've got headaches, I've got stomach aches, I've got headache, I've got stomach ache, feeling irritable, having trouble concentrating, avoiding school, not quite being themselves, not eating very well, staying in their rooms a lot. So the sources of stress for children and teenagers can be external and quite often varied. So it may range from handing a piece of coursework in, or to a friend who ghosts them online on social media. Stresses that can be the outside influence, or they can be the internal influence. So associated with what we call catastrophic thinking, always thinking the worst, or associated with the fear of what's going to happen next. There's periods in children's lives, children and teenagers' life, where stress is normal. It's normal to feel stressed about moving into the next class. It's very normal to feel stressed about the transition to high school. It's completely normal to feel stressed about your pending exams. However, there's periods where, in your role as a family member, where it is becoming a bit of a concern because it's going on for longer than usual, and it doesn't seem to be reducing as well. And there's seemingly no external triggers. So we've made the transition to high school. We're now 4 months on. Joey is saying that he or she feels very settled. They're saying they're not being bullied. They're saying their coursework is fine and everything's going okay, yet there's still significant signs of stress. That's the point at which to ask questions. And we come on to look at where to go next in a second. So anxiety. I quite like this quote. So anxiety is a thin stream of fear. So that constant fear. What if they don't like my work? What about if I'm going to lose my job? What about if I'm going to fail my coursework? What about if they think I'm rubbish? That trickle stream of fear trickling through the mind, if encouraged, So it's that snowball. What about if they think I'm no good and then everyone laughs at me and then I fail my coursework and then everyone will think I'm really rubbish and then I won't get my GCSEs and then I'll be completely unemployed and I'll never get a job. If encouraged, so if overthought, it can cut a channel into the mind in which it just dominates. Anxiety is just, it's just a sneaky one. It can creep up on us. It can start so small and then seconds later we're there with this big snowball. So it really can move quite quickly as well. Anxiety can affect us all in different ways. So experiences and triggers for anxiety can vary greatly from person to person. And no two people will have the same experience of triggers and thoughts that go on in their mind. So anxiety in itself is a normal emotion. We all experience it from time to time. I think of my daughter this summer. I was working a little bit and I put her into a sports camp. And every morning she was a bit anxious about it. She presented with the sign that we had before, which was the tummy aches and the headaches. And that was her normal emotion of, this feels a bit weird. I don't know the other kids. I don't really know the teachers. But then at the end of the day, she bounced out, but she still had that anxiety and that apprehension each morning. Again, a normal reaction to a different situation. So fears are a normal part of everyday life, but anxiety is when our body changes, so physiologically responds to the fear in our mind as much as it does to our body. So it might be that we feel ourselves bubbling along, okay, and then out of nowhere, a trigger situation happens. We can feel it in our body, so our breathing might change, our palms might become sweaty, we might get the headaches, we might get the tummy aches. We can feel it in our minds as well. Start small, and then before we know, we're catastrophizing. We're in a state of complete anxiety. So anxiety is very common in the teenage years because teenagers have new experiences, new opportunities, and also new challenges. They want more independence, yet they haven't quite got that independent level of common sense, dare I say, in some instances. Some of them do. They want the more independence, but they haven't got the life skills at times, not all the time, but at times, to manage that independence. Part of this is about growing up as well and learning to make mistakes, but that can really, really unsettle some teenagers, and it can really wobble them and make them apprehensive as well. And like I say, some anxiety is normal. So teenagers might feel anxious about starting secondary school or looking a particular way, or have a fear of fitting in with friends or sitting exams. Those would be normal fears and normal levels of anxiety. Perhaps other ones which cause a bit of a difficulty is, I forgot what I called the little girl, let's call her Charlie, who I saw earlier this week. And I'd say her anxiety falls into the bracket of being overly anxious. It's actually an anxiety problem. What about if I get the wrong answer? Will people laugh at me? What about if I can't hear Miss? And it to such an extent now she can't go on the playground because she's fearful of the tree that's falling on her. And we unpicked why. One day she felt quite anxious. She was looking out of the window. She saw the tree shaking in the wind. She's now got an anxiety around the tree falling on her. So anxiety can be quite contagious. For her, she's felt anxious. She's looked out of the window. She's made the connection quite there. All this anxiety is inside her, has now been also put on the tree. So this anxiety is now really big. And this is where anxiety is it's a sneaky one. It can just attach on various different things. And before we know it, it can really, really take over aspects of our thinking. Okay, so when to ask questions? Like I said, I know I keep saying, but anxiety can be a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. So most normal anxiety goes away quickly, perhaps in a day or a few hours, quite possibly over the course of a few days. So an anxiety problem is when anxious feelings are very intense, They go on for weeks or months or even longer. They get in the way of a young person's ability to learn, socialise and enjoy daily life. Really sorry, I can hear my I think it's my little gal going to bed. So sorry if you can hear somebody in the background. So if you're worried that your child might have an anxiety problem, the key is to ask the following questions. Is my child's anxiety stopping them from doing things they want to do? Is it interfering with friendships, schoolwork, or family life? How does my child's behaviour compare with the behaviour of other young people the same age? And is my child extremely distressed by the feelings of anxiety? A key point here is to speak with the school. I always think it's really good to just have a conversation with the class teacher in the instance of primary school, or the head of year in the instance of secondary school. One, because they may have information such as, oh yes, we've got, I don't know, spelling test or times table test or a bit of coursework coming up. I can see that they're worried, but a lot of the other kids are worried, or there's been a fallout in this friendship group. They might not have information that you have. They might not have noticed anything, but they can keep more of an eye and feed back to you, actually things are okay here. Or they might say, yeah, actually we're beginning to notice things as well. And it might be that they've noticed and they can do a discrete piece of work, a couple of sessions within school. The class teacher or the head of year can have a little word just to unpick what's going on. The key with anxiety is trying to nip it in the bud quite quickly, because anxiety can become a problem when a young person feels quite stuck, and when it feels very overwhelming and very distressing and a very unmanageable experience. And this kind of worrying can go on for a long time, and it can leave people feeling absolutely exhausted and isolated. So the bottom line is, if anxiety is affecting your child's life, he or she will need to learn skills to help them overcome it. This will take time, this will take hard work and support, but it will be well worth it in the end. So like I say, worth speaking to other family members, friends, and the school is a key one. Okay, so how can parents help? So this really should say parents, family, carers. So how can you help in your role of parent or grandparent? So let's have a quick look. So I'm going to talk to you about ruler, which is recognizing emotions, helping our children to recognize their own emotions, helping our children to understand their own emotions, to label and express their own emotions, and to regulate their emotions. And it's what we could, so it's sequential, which means it goes in order. So the last one, and we could unpick each of these one by one, is about how we learn to cope with our strong negative emotions, how we learn to cope with the bumpiness of emotions. That's called emotional regulation. We can't emotionally regulate until we've expressed how we're feeling. So we focus on how we express them. We can't express how we're feeling until we've labelled them, until we've got the right language to express our emotions. And we're not going to be able to label our emotions until we recognise what's going on for us right there, right then. So this is what we call a programme of emotional literacy. Schools implement it an awful lot, and it's easy to get into the home. So like I say, it's recognising, understanding, labelling, expressing and regulating. So let's go through one. Okay, so recognising. So question, what's the difference between disappointment and anger? Just think on that while I take a quick sip of juice. Okay, it might seem like a pointless question. It might seem like it doesn't really matter type question. But the thing is, it really is important. So disappointment is about unmet expectations. So unmet expectations, I was due to meet somebody up the other day and they let me down. That's about an unmet expectation. That's about a disappointment. Anger is about perceived injustice. You're driving to work, there's 2 lanes and someone hops in front of you. That's a perceived injustice. That's not fair. I've been queuing up for 15 minutes to get to these traffic lights and they just come up the side and they cut in. That's not fair. That's an injustice. So the 2 emotions are very different. The reason it matters is because the way we respond to them is very different as well. So how we respond to anger is generally quite a heated, quite a hot, quite a big emotion. It's very different to how we respond to disappointment. Disappointment is emotion that is easier to talk about and almost shrug our shoulders and give a big huff and, oh, that's really annoying. Feel a bit irritated, but then let it go. It's easier to let disappointment go than what it is let anger go. If we confuse the 2, which is really, really commonly done as well, not just with kids, but with adults as well, we can have really the big over the top reactions to disappointment. So if we can't recognize in ourselves, or our children can't recognize in themselves, I feel disappointed, and they respond in an angry way, that's a lot of hot-headed emotions coming out throughout the course of a day, because life is full of little disappointments and big disappointments here and there. So once we recognize in ourselves what's going on for our own feelings, we can help our kids recognize it in themselves. So for example, I'll give you an example from today. They must be doing something Halloweeny at my daughter's school, because she came home and she was quite angry because they were putting their I couldn't really get to the bottom of it, but they were putting their Halloween costume on, and one of her friends laughed. I think she might have had it on the wrong way. And she was saying, oh, I feel really angry. And she was getting quite upset about it. And we sat down and just had a little bit of a chat and just took literally 30 seconds. I said, I don't think that's anger. I think you feel disappointed that she laughed at you and that's annoyed you. And she sat on it for a couple of minutes and like, I suppose so, that's right. But before that was quite a distressing emotion. She was quite teary over it because she thought her friends were picking on her and being mean. The reality is she put her Halloween costume on a little bit wrong. It probably was funny to put her Halloween costume on backwards. She felt disappointed that they laughed. So it's a big, it's a key difference in emotion, and it's a big difference in reaction. If we respond to every disappointment with the reaction of anger, we're going to end up in a bit of, well, kids will end up in a very, very tricky place, because they'll just be kicking off all over the show. Okay. Oh, hang on. Okay. So how do we help our kids recognize emotions? It's quite simple. We name it for them. If we can recognize it in us and we can recognize it in them, we name it for them. So some typical parenting scripts here, and I've done these myself. Don't worry, there's nothing to be afraid of. Oh gosh, it's not that big a deal, it's broke. Let's just fix it. Homework's your job, just get it done. If you focus, you'll be finished sooner. These are completely normal, absolutely okay parent scripts that we will be saying day in and day out. But it's a real key opportunity to help our kids recognize their emotions. So let's take the first one. Don't worry, there's nothing to be afraid of. What that's telling me is that child is scared about something. So as a parent, we can help, or carer or family member, we can help them recognize that emotion. Don't worry, I can see how that's scary for you. Or don't worry, I think you're feeling scared. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's not that big a deal, it broke. Let's just fix it. So there's disappointment there. If we can put ourselves in their shoes, there's bound to be disappointment. I get that you're disappointed. Right, come on. It's not that big a deal that it's broke. Let's just fix it. So homework's your job, just get it done. If you focus, you'll be finished sooner. So there's a level of irritation, I'm guessing, there with that one. I remember it well, not wanting to do your homework and wanting to go out instead, or do whatever you want to do instead. So again, reflecting back, right, I get that you're irritated. I remember it well myself. However, you've got to get it done. The sooner you focus, the sooner you'll be done. So it's reflecting back, noticing, literally observing, taking it and handing it back. Nothing more than that. We're helping our kids recognize their feelings, and it will gradually build up over time. If they can recognize their feelings, they'll be able to understand their feelings. Okay. So to recognize emotions, families can also just build in on what I said. So observing and handing it back. Discuss emotions, how they're expressed. You might want to discuss customers that you've come across at work, how that customer came across. They felt very angry and they looked like this, and they overreacted in this way, and they were actually a bit rude because they felt very angry. But I had another customer who dealt with it very calmly, and I could tell they were calm, and I could tell they were a little bit irritated by A, B, and C. So discussing your own experiences of what emotions you've felt that day, or what emotions that you've seen on other people. You're at the absolute forefront of reflecting back the whole range of emotions that you're seeing in the public every single day. Like I said before, noticing and honouring children's emotions. You're noticing they're scared, you're noticing they're frustrated, you're noticing they're excited, you're noticing they're nervous. Name it and hand it back to them. The more they hear it, the more they can think, oh yeah, I do feel like that. The more they're able to hear it and connect it to what's going on for them right there, right then. And acknowledging your emotion, the children's emotion. So don't dishcloth them away. So think of the dishcloth, don't swipe them away. Oh, you'll be okay, come on, right, get in. Or soapboxing. No, you shouldn't feel like that. So dishcloth is wiping it away, and soapboxing is preaching how they should be feeling. What that does is it takes the emotion away, but the emotion is still there for the child or young person, and that doesn't really go anywhere. That feels uncomfortable when somebody doesn't really understand or doesn't recognize your emotion or dismisses it. You're left feeling a bit uncomfortable, a bit angry as well. So not doing all of that as a family member or carer, but instead saying, right, I get that you're apprehensive, I get that you're scared, I get that you're angry about this, but come on, and just acknowledging it. Sometimes it might be worth as well saying, I get it, and that's okay to feel that. Okay. So understanding emotions. So the key to understanding our own emotions is to be able to talk about them. Fundamentally, to be able to understand our emotions, we need to be able to tell the story about our emotions, how we've felt like this, how we've got here, right here today, how we've got to this place. If left alone up here, this is where we can get the snowball effect, or we can get that self-critical effect. It's all my fault. God, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that. The minute we share our story, the minute that we're able to work through our story and be like, actually, that wasn't so bad, or yeah, I can see it from that side, or that was a little bit unfair. That isn't just me, that's them as well. Or in the case of anger, yeah, I can see that from their point of view. So the more we talk, the more that we gain our understanding of our own emotions. So how do we help our children and young people? And the key is being able to listen to them, just sitting, just listening. So not soapboxing, not telling them how they should feel, not dishclothing it, so not wiping it away, just listening. I'm not talking hours. I'm not talking sitting down and having like a therapeutic session each night, even if it's just that 2 minutes, that 1 minute, that 30 seconds. I come back to the case of, I forgot what they called the boy at the beginning. I'm going to give him a different name now. Daniel, the one that was is withdrawing and going to his room a lot and avoiding family members because it always ends up in a big bash. So for him, I'd say the biggest issue for him is family dynamics have changed a little bit, and it means that he's got a lot less time with his grandparents, and also his mum and his dad, just because of life circumstances. So he used to feel very, very listened to. He used to have a lot of quality time with mum. Things have changed recently and he's got a lot less time. What mum used to do, and she still does now when she's got the time, is really understand and really get him. Now it can go for weeks without a conversation really had between them. And what he's saying to me and what he's saying to school and what he'll be saying to mum soon, because they're in a place now where they're ready to move forward, is I don't always feel understood. I don't feel listened to. I don't feel heard. Like I say, we're not talking that mum or anyone needs to sit down for hours each night and have a like that therapeutic discussion. It's just, let's take some of these scripts. I hate school, I'm never going back. Whoa, that's quite big. Help me to understand. It's taking that 30 seconds, that 1 minute to say, are you okay? I've just noticed that you feel that you're presenting a little bit out of whack. What's going on? I'm here to listen. Let's take that other second script. We've fallen out and we'll never be friends again. Really easy one to dish a cloth. Oh, don't be so silly. You've been best friends since the age of 2, right? You'll be fine. Go on, off you go. Just taking that time of, oh gosh, what's happened? How have you got there? The third bullet point down, just don't ask. I'm just sick of it. Just don't ask. My response there would be, my advice to that would be, I know you've asked me not to ask, but I just need to know, do you want to talk about it? Because I really want to understand how you've got here. So just using that simple script of help me to understand what's going on, or whoa, what's happened, or you don't seem yourself today, help me to understand how you've got there. Just taking that few seconds will hopefully let the story unfold a little bit, and then you're able to say, gosh, okay, that sounds really tricky. You don't need to problem solve. It just needs to be heard. There's always the element of you need to be in a certain place at a certain time. And this is always 10 seconds before you go out of the door. Just taking that extra 10 seconds. I'm not talking being half an hour late for work or anything like that, to say, okay, I've heard you. I'm really sorry, I really need to go. It doesn't mean that I don't care about you. I really want to check in and follow this up later because it's important to me, because you're important to me. So if time is a bit of a feature here, it's just almost setting that boundary to say, time isn't on my side, but you do matter to me and what your voice is important. Can I just check in later with you? Tell you what, I'll be a bit late doing this, whether that's being late doing dinner or whatever it is, so it feels like they're being prioritized. So where possible, just taking that time. If it's not possible right then, setting the boundary, saying, I care about what you've got to say, can we do it later? Because there's also something about the hurriedness of life here, and we've got to be realistic. You know, I'm a working mum myself, and I know what it's like. Time can be quite demanding at times, but there's still ways around that. So how to understand emotions. So families can reflect on your own emotional response and explore how feeling this way influences you or your child's behaviour. So that first bullet point means that, how can I phrase it? So if we're okay as parents, if we're okay as professionals, if we're okay as aunties and uncles, grandkids, grandparents, we're much more likely to be able to connect to that person right there. If we're feeling naffed off, if we're feeling anxious, if we're feeling angry, it's recognizing what's going on for us right there, right then, and taking those 5-10 minutes to just decompress ourselves, hide ourselves away for 5 minutes, or just saying, can I just have 5 minutes? I just feel a bit busy. I just need to get through what's in my mind, and then I'm here for you. You're not going to be in a place to be able to help with understanding if you're not okay, if you're a bit emotionally heightened, if you're a little bit emotionally spun out at that point in time. So being able to reflect on where we're at is really, really important. And then the understanding is asking your children questions about, I've noticed you're sick every morning before school. What's going on? Or I noticed, like in the instance of my little girl having tummy ache on the way to sports camp in the summer, I've noticed that you've got a tummy ache each morning. I don't think this is a tummy ache. My sense is that this is a worry. Help me to understand your worries. So just asking those questions, they short and open. So be the scientist, be the judge. So check out what's going on. So labeling and expressing. So labeling is really, really key. We come on to look at this now, and how to express our emotions. So we've looked at how parents, how we, in our role as family and carers, how we can help our kids recognize their emotions, really key. I work with many children and young people whose emotions don't go much beyond, I feel angry, I feel happy. And that's the extent of their emotional vocabulary. And that's a problem, because if a lot of the time they're coming up against irritation and frustration and annoyance and fear, and they interpret that as, I feel angry, they're reacting in a really angry way. And then a few years later, they come and meet me because that school placement is really wobbly, or that home situation is really wobbly. And it's because there's high levels of anger there, high levels of distress, whereas actually it's not anger, it's a bit of anger, it's a lot of frustration, there's a bit of fear there, there's a bit of hurt there, there's a bit of guilt there as well. So it's really important that we help our kids to recognize those emotions. We've looked at understanding, how we can help our kids understand their emotions, asking those simple questions and just being there to listen, but checking out that we're okay to be able to listen. Now, like I say, we look at labeling, so how we label them and how we express them. So why is labeling our feelings important? So labeling our feelings is literally, I feel anxious, I feel scared, I feel worried, I feel really peed off, I feel happy, I feel excited, I feel apprehensive, I feel nervous, I feel guilty, I feel a little bit ashamed. That's labeling. It's finding the right word for that feeling. It's not happy, sad. That's just two big labels, but there's a whole lot underneath that. Why is it important to label our feelings correctly? Sort of comes back, well, it does come back to the point I was raising at the beginning about the difference between disappointment and anger. So number one, it legitimizes our experience. That means it makes our experience feel a bit more real. So for example, you've had a big fallout with your boss, or you've gone into a meeting with your boss and they haven't quite got it. They haven't quite been as understanding as what you would have hoped. They've been all right, but they didn't quite get it. If you come out and you say, oh God, I feel really angry, with your colleague, and you're just discussing how angry you're feeling, you're going to go away feeling really angry. Whereas if you come out of that meeting thinking, actually, I feel really angry that they responded to me like that, but I feel a bit disappointed that they didn't really understand me. And now I feel a bit nervous, because if they haven't fully got it, where do I go there? And it just means that we're really able to get a grip on how we're feeling. It also helps others meet our own needs. So if we're able to label appropriately, we're able to others are able to tune into what's going on for us. It also helps us meet the needs of others. So if you're speaking to your child or teen and they say, I feel really isolated, I feel really left out, that's a really different reaction to them saying, I feel really low in mood. Low in mood is a response of, oh gosh, what's happened, tell me. It's a very different response, whereas I feel isolated is, oh no. It's the same question, what's happened, come on, tell me what's gone on in the friendship group. It allows you to really channel down. And ultimately, that means we feel a bit more connected to others and a bit more understood. I'm conscious it's 8 o'clock, so if people do need to go, I've got this. Oh, I've got about another 20 minutes, so if people do need to go, like I say, things will be shared and the handouts, and it's going to be recorded, so please feel free to go. Express an emotion. So moving on. So the scariest one, how do we express emotion, which is quite scary? Will I be judged if I express this emotion? If I talk to people and tell people I feel really scared, I feel a bit isolated, I feel a bit embarrassed, I feel a bit guilty about what I've done, I feel a bit ashamed about what I've done. It's completely human nature to think, am I going to be judged? Are they going to spread this? Am I going to cry? Will they think bad of me? What am I going to do with their response? So it's really quite a scary place to be able to express the emotion. But the inability to express our emotion, it's like a pain that just lingers on. It's like this uncomfortable feeling that's just inside you, almost like this toxic thing that you know is there, and it gives you tummy aches and it gives you headaches and you feel a bit jittery and you feel a bit anxious and you feel a bit nervous and you just don't feel yourself a lot, and it's the buildup of the emotion. So it's really important that we're able to express our emotions. So there's something about picking exactly the right person to express our emotions to, however that may be, whoever that may be. But suffering in silence, so not expressing our emotion, makes it impossible for anyone to truly know what's going on for us, to be able to understand us, to be able to understand our journey or our story, to understand how we got here, right here today, and what's gone on for us. So as humans, it's our impulse to cover up our emotions and do the whole, yeah, I'm fine, nothing's wrong with me, I can deal with it, it is what it is, that kind of approach. And that works in some instances, but it's also really key to be able to express our emotions, because the buildup can lead to stress, which can lead to anxiety, which can lead to other difficulties as well, which ultimately means that we're not leading the best life that we want to be able to lead. So how do we help our kids with expression? Massively important. And it's an obvious one, really. It's about conversations. It's about talking to them. It's about modeling conversations and really listening. And really listening doesn't mean talking at them. It just means asking the questions at the right time, and sometimes reflecting back to them, gosh, that sounds like you feel scared, or I understand how that felt hard for you. So using key terms such as, that's okay to feel that. I love that term, that's okay. And also, I understand that how you feel like that. Those two little phrases, it's almost like a blister's being burst, because all of a sudden you're storing up this strong negative emotion. And when somebody is able to hold it with you and say, that's okay that you feel like that, okay, you reacted, you're saying now that you shouldn't have reacted like that, I get it, you did, it is what it is, but it's okay that you were angry, and now that makes sense why you reacted like that. So just using those phrases is really key. So if we help, this is a really key one for why expression's important. If we help children to talk, we help develop their social skills, because if they can talk, they can socially interact with others. If we help children to talk, they will learn how to reflect on their feelings rather than act out their feelings. Like I say, the amount of very dysregulated, we'd call it, but that means very wobbly, very angry people or children and teenagers that I come across where they don't know what's going on in there. That's difficult. There's a lot of emotion, but they're behaving their feelings. They're not in a position to be able to attend school. They're on the point of being excluded from school. They're constantly having ding dongs in school. They're acting out these big feelings because they haven't been able to express it, and it's got to go somewhere, and typically it comes out with behavior. If we help our children to talk, it will help develop their brains as well as their emotional skills, because we know the big chemicals, the negative chemicals in the brain, the stress chemicals, can lead to inattention. It can lead to not being able to concentrate. So it's helping that as well. If we help children to talk, we help them to be able to manage stress throughout their lives. If we help children to talk about their feelings, they develop more sophisticated language for their emotions. It's not I'm happy, I'm angry, I'm sad. It's I'm frustrated, I'm annoyed, I'm irritated. This is a really important one, I think. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet points down. If we help children to talk, we help them to be able to suffer well. Life is tough at times. Life's good at times. Life's great at times. Life's okay at times. And life is really rubbish at times as well. And inevitably, there's pockets. Some pockets are bigger than others where life just feels really hard and really, really tough. But if we're helping children to be able to talk, we're helping them to be able to suffer well. We're helping them to be able to say, I'm finding it hard right now. I'm struggling at this point. Can I talk about it? That might be in 10 or 20 years with their partner, with their friends, with their own kids, because if we're able to express it, we're able to feel better about it. If we help them to talk, we open up their capacity to take in comfort. That means we open up their capacity to talk to people, to feel connected, to ultimately, in the long run, feel a bit better about how we're feeling. So how? The key is listening. So I'm here for you, I'm listening. So scripts are really important, and I come on to look at scripts at the end, and sharing times whereby you've got emotional. I get it. I get how you felt angry. I had that once in blah de blah de blah. I felt scared in blah de blah de blah. That's okay. So sharing times and normalizing how they're feeling. So emotional regulation. So it's not about getting rid of the emotion. It's about learning to ride the wave. It's not about suppressing or denying the feeling. It's about learning to ride the wave. Once we accept the feelings, I feel embarrassed, I feel guilty, I feel irritated, I feel frustrated. We can see things with greater clarity, and we feel a bit less provoked by them, because we're not trying to do the pushing it down and pretending it's not there. I don't know if you've ever had a time where somebody's just named that feeling for you, or you've got to a place where you're like, actually, I thought this was about feeling really angry and annoyed, but actually I can feel this is about, I can see now this is about feeling a bit hurt by that. And the minute that somebody says or recognizes, or you recognize in yourself what's really going on, again, it's like that blister has burst. It's like, yeah, actually, that's how I felt. That's still an uncomfortable emotion, but I feel better now. I understand it more. So how do we regulate? So a bit of a life skill. So teaching our kids to pause, to respond instead of react. So like I say, I I forget what I called the boy again. I think it was Daniel, is that the name I gave him? The one where he's pulling away from the family and he feels misunderstood. He's a big reactor. We've got some big reactions coming from Daniel, and the school placement is a little bit shaky at this point in time. So we're just working really, really hard with him about, it's okay to feel this. That's okay. You're entitled to feel this. It's the reaction we need to change. Let's respond, which means stop and think and talk and respond instead of react. Because at the moment we're getting the big expressive, aggressive, verbally aggressive reactions. Whereas actually what we're wanting to do is for him to come back, calm down, check in and say, Miss, I don't think you got that right, or can I talk to you about that? Whereas at the moment, like I say, we're getting a lot of stomping out the classrooms, etc., etc. So reaction, so responding, stop, think and go. The traffic lights, stop, think about it or breathe it out, and then respond to that feeling as opposed to react to that feeling. Scripts, so helping children to have scripts in their head of, okay, you need to respond, you not react, or that's okay to feel annoyed, go for a walk around the block and come back, or that's okay to feel angry, take some deep breaths. Modeling real life examples whereby you've had to regulate as well. I felt really anxious, I felt really upset, I felt really low in mood, it felt really difficult for me to leave the house, but I went for a walk with my friend and I spoke about it, or I made sure that I did a bit of exercise that day, or I made sure that I put some music on and danced around the room. What's your strategies for regulating emotion? The healthy ones, ideally. But what are your strategies for regulating those emotions that you feel? Clear, consistent boundaries is really key as well, of reflecting back. Look, I can see how you're feeling angry. I get it. I get that you feel angry because so-and-so ripped your homework up, but we can't have you kicking the family members like this because it's not keeping them safe. You're okay to feel angry. That behavior is not okay. So what you're saying is that emotion is okay. That behavior is not okay. What can I do to help you? Blowouts happen. You know, we're all humans, we're all parents, we're all grandparents, we're all carers, etc. We're going to lose our rag at points in time. It's completely normal. For me, it's often when the kids are trying to get out the door on the way to school and we're always late. So that's my weak spot. Blowouts happen, ruptures happen. It's about the repair. It's about owning it, really, saying, I'm sorry, I got really cross. I got cross because you didn't put your shoes on when I asked you to, and I had to ask 8 times. But I did get cross at that. I'm sorry because I did snap there. Can we move forward from this? Tomorrow, can you put your shoes on, please? So it's about acknowledging what's gone on and repairing that situation. So, like I say, sharing your strategies. So people often say to me, it's like talking to a brick wall. I don't get anywhere. They just don't listen. They just shrug. Totally normal in the teenage years. It's almost like talk to the hands, the face isn't listening, or whatever the phrase is. So just some advice here. It's not personal. Empathy and validation. So that's saying, I know you don't want to listen to me right now. I just need you to know I can tell that you're feeling angry, and that's okay. And you'll probably go, I'm not feeling angry. Don't respond to it. Just say, okay, well, I'm here to care, or I love you, and that's okay. So just trying to remain calm, empathy, and recognizing their emotions. Talking indirectly as well. It's okay to feel angry. Look, I get it. You lost it at school today, or I get that you didn't do this because you felt really anxious and overwhelmed, and that's okay. When you're ready, I'm here to listen because I really want you to help. I really want to help you understand. So reflecting back, it's okay not to be in the mood for a chat, but I'm here. So don't over question. And if you do get the talking to a brick wall, just move into a lighter place after a few seconds. So ending that interaction on a lighter note. So anyway, did you see this on the news, or did you see that, or did you hear from so and so? So it's not left hanging in that uncomfortable sort of situation. And coming back to a place of care and kindness as well. I know you don't want to talk, but just to let you know, I care about you and I'm here for you and I love you. If that feels comfortable, it's always a really useful one. And trying where possible to pencil time in together. Again, you know, we're not talking hours. This is the reality of life. We're working parents, but whether it's 5-10 minutes here and there, whether it's just grabbing a hot chocolate or a coffee or a walk down the street, whatever that is, try to pencil time in together and make sure that time talks about everything and nothing. How's school going? What's going on? How's that friendship group? How's that making you feel? It's that special time. It's not a time for rollickings and pulling them up on everything, because ultimately they'll avoid you. Okay, in one ear and out the other. So this is where they really just don't listen. You've asked them to be back at 10 o'clock. They stroll back in at 11 o'clock. You've asked them to tidy their toys away and they've just got more toys out. Where do you go with it? Where do you go with it when you're trying to develop their emotional skills, but you feel completely up to here with your emotional skills? And the key is you're still parents here. And even though you're trying to develop their emotional skills, it's still important to do the boundaries and do the consistency. So it's about that assertiveness, that being brave, and going, do you know what, I'm the parent, I'm the grandparent, I'm the carer here, and it's my job to set this clear and consistent boundary, because actually if I can't set the boundaries, they're not going to set the boundaries for themselves, and that's a problem when it comes into adult life. So when addressing behavior, why these things matter. Okay, look, it's really important that you come home when I've asked you to, or it's really important that you put your toys away, it's really important, blah, 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 because I need to know where you are, because your safety matters to me, or I need you to put your toys away because this is our house, and our house is a place where we all want to relax, and the messy house isn't helping us relax. So have a think about why it matters to you. It's not you being an ogre, it's not you being unreasonable. There's a reason why that matters to you, and reflect it back to them. Address the emotion. I think this is going to make you angry because I'm telling you something that you don't want to hear, but I need you to listen because it's important for me and it's important for you. I need you to be in at this time because I care about your safety. And then explaining why that's important, and then opening it up. What's your thoughts on it? Those clear, consistent boundaries are really key as well. So if you can't be in at a reasonable time, then I'm going to have to do this. If you come in at a reasonable time, that's fine, because then you're going to be allowed out again. So they if and a then. If this, then this. And it can be a positive as much as it can a negative. And all positions need to be heard and respected. So again, asking them, you've got a voice in this because this is about me and you, and this is about how we're functioning in the family. What's your thoughts? So asking their voice as well, for their voice as well. Okay. So this is a little bit more wordy really. So I won't go through this now because I'm conscious of time, and this is quite self-explanatory, and you can look at this when the handouts come around. But this is about the teenagers, so how to support teenagers with the anxious thinking, helping them to rationalize by breaking their thoughts down, challenging them thoughts. Okay, that you say that you're going to fail your coursework, what's your evidence for failing your coursework, helping them to think about times that they've managed stress before. And then 10 helpful steps I've put in there as well, again, for you to have a read through in your own time. A lot of this I've already discussed as well. I'm just having a look to see if there's anything I need to pick up on. The only one that I think I need to pick up on is number 9. So encouraging healthy risk taking. Really quite tough in the teenage years of how to encourage healthy risk taking. And my advice is coming back to the language of choices and consequences. So putting it back on them. Okay, so you're saying that you want to go out with your friends. You need to think about the choice. You can choose to do A, B, and C, the consequence will be, or you can choose not to do A, B, and C, the consequence will be. So this comes into having conversations about all things drugs and alcohol and all the other teenage things that parents worry about. So you can choose to drink or you can choose to smoke. That the consequence is that it's likely to affect your learning and your brain. So really your choice in behavior, it has a consequence there. So talking to them, being really open about the risks around sex and drugs and social media and alcohol, etc., etc. You can't fundamentally, you can't follow them wherever they go and tag them, etc. But you can have the open conversations and you can encourage them to think about risk taking. Okay, so final couple of slides. So this relates to, I like this slide. So you've got all the fish swimming in the right direction and then the one red fish. So really the purpose of this slide is to say, sorry, someone's just entered the waiting room. Now go. So the purpose of this slide is say you can implement everything I've spoken about with absolute accuracy and be the best person in the world at doing so. But unless you've got a few things in place, like that little red fish, you're going to be swimming against the tide. And these are the obvious ones. Good diet is key. Routines, sticking to routines where possible. Access to exercise, healthy sleep patterns, direct discussions on drugs and alcohol, sex, etc. Reducing the gaming time is a key one. Those consistent, fair but firm boundaries, explain to them, telling them that you love them, telling them that you care about them as well. All these things are like the foundations of what we build emotional literacy on. And final slide. So you can't pour from an empty cup, which really relates to make sure that you look after yourself as well, because if you're heightened, if you're stressed, if you're anxious, we've got a lot less emotional availability for others. Sometimes we don't recognize how stressed or anxious or how out of whack we are until we've come through that period of time. But make sure, I know it's tough, make sure that you're finding pockets and moments to do stuff for you as well. Whatever that may be, it's personal to each and every one. But last slide, and thank you. Thanks ever so much for listening. Sorry for going over by a little bit. I've never once managed to stick to this, and I'm glad we didn't get a little 4-year-old visitor kicking off about all things bath time.
Jude, thank you so much. I think that was just an amazing session, and I know you won't have been able to keep your eye on the chat, Jude, because you've been obviously busy presenting, but there's been so many members just posting in the chat how incredibly helpful and reassuring that has been, and lots of members wanting to know if they'll get the recording. So I think the fact that we've still got 101 of you with us at nearly 8:30 on a wet and cold Thursday night is a real reflection on just how brilliant that was. Thank you so much, Jude. And I think the fact that so many members want to have the recording, I almost have a sense that when we've got a tricky situation at home with the child, we'll say to them, just hang on, I'm just going to go and rewatch the recording. I'll be back in an hour and 10 minutes, and then I'll know exactly how to get this right. That's certainly how I feel anyway. I'm wondering whether we could take 5 minutes just to try and get through some of the questions, and just to say in advance that obviously we can't get, if we tried to get through every question, we'd be here I think till 9:30. So let's just dive in, and if that's okay, Jude, if you're okay with us for about 5 or 10 minutes more tops, and any questions that we don't get chance to go through, we're really happy to sort of group and send to Jude after the session. So there's a number of members, Jude, who've come up with questions around supporting strategies for helping children settle in. So a child who's maybe moved to a new school or has moved to a new area and is feeling isolated. Maybe if I just pose that as one issue that's come up in the chat, Jude, in a number of questions. And secondly, there's a really interesting question which a number of colleagues have raised around how we protect our children from our own anxiety. And I know that came up in some of what you said, but just about strategies for making sure that our kids aren't picking up on our strong emotions around anxiety, just conscious that it's been a very, very worrying time for everybody. If I just pose those two for now, is that okay, Jude? And we'll see if we've got time for some more.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So remind me of the first one. So a few.
Yes. So strategies for helping a child settle in. So we've got a child who's feeling very isolated at school, because actually I think the question was that she's the only girl in the class. And secondly, a question was raised around children moving to a new school and a new area, and strategies for helping them settle.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think with the moving, and probably less so the girl, but I'll come on to her, the girl being the only one in the class. But the moving, you're almost dealing with two things there, because you're dealing with the loss, and in some situations it will be a little bit of grief about what's been left behind, so that would need recognizing, and then you've got the anxiety of the change. So I think there's a couple of things. One, it's about making sure that the past and what's been left behind is very much spoken about, and said, what are your favourite memories about when we moved from there? What do you remember that was really, really positive? And talking about it, and then recognising that for them, and reflecting back of it's great that you've got these memories, and it's hard. It's really hard when we have to leave, because we miss those little bits, and that's a very normal emotion, and it can feel a bit hard at times, and it can hurt. It can feel a bit hurty in our tummy. I'm assuming that this child is a primary age child, so you'd have to adapt your language accordingly. So there's something about recalling and talking about the positive memories, recognizing that loss and change is hard, and that at times we feel okay about it, at times we feel worried. There's a good book called The Invisible String, which talks about loss, but how we're still connected. So that was a book that I used a couple of times throughout COVID, where people couldn't see each other and it was distanced. But The Invisible String's a nice one. So you might want to, again, if it's a primary age child, read the book and talk about the themes that are coming up. And then moving forward, there's the current around the apprehension and the anxiety around making friends. And my advice there is always speak with the school, have a really open relationship with the school, whether it's email or conversations with the teacher, really putting them in the loop about where this young person or young people are up to. They're feeling worried, they're not feeling like they're making friends. There's different ages where friendship groups are harder to enter into. So anything Key Stage 1, reception year 1, year 2, transitions tend to be okay. Once you're into sort of year 4, year 5, year 6, the group dynamics are a little bit more formed, and it's a little bit harder to enter into these group dynamics, and that's where schools need to really adjust things accordingly. So there's stuff like speak with the teacher. There's the obvious, like inviting other kids around for play dates, getting to know their mums as well. And again, having those conversations. How was school today? What did you enjoy? What went well? Anything that you found a little bit hard? And then trying to problem solve as well. Or you felt a bit left out. Oh no, gosh, tell me a little bit more about that. And reflecting back, that sounds like it's really difficult for you. What could you do tomorrow? Do you think you could ask Joshua whether he'd play with you? Okay, and then speak with the teacher. So taking a bit of a problem solving approach. With the girl who's the only girl in the class, that's quite an unusual situation. That's a tricky one. If it's a 2-form intake, that means if they've got 2 classes within the school, that's easier to work around, because you could just do some cross learning. If it's just a single class intake, that's a bit tricky. My advice is, I think this would need raising with the school and just expressing your concerns, because there's limited stuff really you can do in terms of changing that as a parent, without speaking with the school, because it's on the school to make sure that there's buddy systems in place, making sure that even if there's peer buddies from different year groups, then that's implemented. Again, play dates, there's, if possible, like after school clubs, whatever they may be, that are available in the local area, so they can make other friends as well. But definitely speaking with school and seeing what they can do to address the imbalance. What, remind me of the other question?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you so much for that, Jude. So the other question, Jude, was around how we can best ensure that our own anxiety doesn't have an impact on our children. So how to do we attempt to mask our own anxiety and behave as if we're okay? Do we talk to kids about the fact that we're feeling anxious? What's the best way to deal with our anxiety to try and make sure that it doesn't have an impact on our kids?
It's a good one. I think first and foremost is that self-reflection of what's going on for us, recognizing that we feel like that and making sure that we've got the measures in place to support us. So those would be your emotional measures of when you're feeling particularly heightened. taking yourself off, doing some deep breathing exercises, whether that's just going on your phone and looking at a load of old rubbish on your phone to get to emotionally connect at a different area. So it's making sure we've got our emotional strategies. The cognitive strategies would be, for those that know about the cognitive behavioural therapy strategies, which would be, I recognise I'm catastrophizing now. I recognizing that I'm snowballing. I'm recognizing that I'm doing all or nothing thinking. Where's my evidence for this? How can I decatastrophize? So there's loads of stuff out there around CBT to help us to do our own CBT, and some questions. In terms of impact on children, it's really hard to mask because they're going to feel it. I think where possible, it's about being very honest with them, but not giving them all the information of the cause of it. So if it's a significant life event, whether it's a family rupture, a divorce, a trauma, my advice is they don't need to be brought into that, but kids are likely to recognize mummy, daddy, mum, dad, grandparents are a little bit out of sorts. And I think being quite honest about that and saying, look, I know I've been a little bit quiet today. I just feel a little bit tired and I've got a few things that I need to think about. But just to let you know, it doesn't involve you. You're very, very loved and I care very deeply for you. And at that point, and this is where it's really, really hard for us as parents to try and then have that emotional connection with our son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter, even though we feel really anxious and even though we feel really tired, and just say, anyway, and how was your day? So you're recognizing it and you're saying, look, I do feel a bit tired. I do feel, and you'd have to adjust it for the age appropriateness of the child. So your primary age child, I do feel a bit tired. Your older primary child, I do feel a bit tired, and there's a couple of things I need to work through in my head. And for your secondary school child, I just feel a little bit apprehensive, a bit frustrated, or a bit nervous about a couple of things. But then the reassurance comes, but it's nothing to do with you, it's mine. I'm working on it. I know what to do. I've got my little strategies on. And do you know what? We all have ups and downs in life. But anyway, love you and I care for you. So it's that reassurance. My fear is if you try and mask it, it's going to leak. And it's such a hard job to try and mask it as a parent. It's exhausting when you're feeling out of whack and then you're trying to give yourself another job on top of everything. It's exhausting. So I think, like I say, very light level honesty. They don't need to be drawn in back into it. They just need to know that they're loved and you care for them.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jude. Just again, really, really practical in terms of like, yeah, do this. I'm conscious of the time and there's a number of questions outstanding, but I think we can group those and pose those to you. But if it's okay, just to bring up one more issue before we wind things up. There's a number of questions coming up, Jude, around anxiety in children. And obviously you've talked a lot about anxiety in the presentation, but it just feels as if there's a lot of members out there struggling, firstly with how, when you know your child's really, really anxious and they just won't talk to you. And I think you've definitely given us some strategies tonight for how to address that, which I know people will find really helpful. But there's a number of questions around self-harm and eating disorders, and also children who are anxious, who are just completely closed off and will not kind of open up. And that's a really big question to end on. But I suppose the specifics are, there's a question around a young person who is talking about not wanting to be here anymore, and there's a concern around lengthy waiting lists and just how to access help. So I think if there's any tips around what our members can be doing to access help for a young person in that position, that would be great. So that's one specific question. And I think secondly, maybe just to end on reminding us around some of those key strategies for how to get an anxious child to open up and talk. Thank you.
I mean, the help, gosh, it's a massive problem, if I'm honest. I don't know, I know it's not just the Greater Manchester region where I am, but yeah, the waiting lists for CAMS and such services are just, to be honest, absolutely ridiculous at this point in time. You're talking a couple of years in some instances, or a few months in other instances as well. So I think the question around help is, I'd always speak with the school. Sometimes schools have access to school counsellors, art therapists, play therapists. So school could be a first port of call for what you've noticed, and then how to access the help for your child or your young person. There may be local charities, there may be local agencies. Most schools would have something called a family support worker or a family parent liaison officer. They tend to be really useful roles for signposting, really. So that would be your people help, if that makes sense. And it might be that the family support worker in the context of the school or the SENCO is able to point you in the direction of websites and other interesting areas. The thing with anxiety is I could point you all over the show, but there's different websites for different levels of anxiety. So different websites for self-harm, for eating, sleep, etc., etc. So my advice, I know I'm signposting a bit and giving a bit of a politician's answer, but it is really to speak with school to see what local services are available. I mean, yeah, just bear in mind the waiting lists for CAMS are just ridiculously long. So CAMS is your child and adolescent mental health support. So I think schools know that, though. The schools that I work with know that it's just not even worth referring. Hence, they've got their own school counsellors, and waiting lists for the school counsellors tend to be a lot shorter, which is reassuring. In terms of answering a question about how to talk to children that won't talk, I don't think we can prize kids open who won't talk, and you run the risk of increasing anxiety by trying to get them to talk, because it creates the talking, it creates more anxiety on not talking, if that makes sense. So come on, talk, I don't want to, I don't know how I'm feeling. And that can create an anxious situation for the adult, because it's like, why won't they talk? I'm their parent, I'm their carer, I'm their grandparent. This is really frustrating. Why won't they talk? And for that child, they're probably thinking, I don't want to talk. I wish he or she would just leave me alone and get off my case. I don't know what's going on. It's really personal. It's really private. I don't even know how to voice it. So you've got all this unspoken stuff going on, really. And that can lead to, understandably, resentment on both sides. That can lead to a little bit of anger. There's a lovely phrase in psychology, which is talk to the walls and the doors will open, which is if you just talk indirectly, which is if you talk to the wall, hopefully the door will open. So it's very much around, look, I'm not expecting you to talk, and that's personal. When you're ready to talk, I just need you to know I've noticed that you feel a little, or I've noticed that you just don't feel yourself right now. I'm wondering if you're worried about something. You might get a response, you probably won't, and you just leave it there. And then you might come back to it a couple of days later and say, look, I know I mentioned it the other day where I've noticed that you seem a bit worried about stuff. I've been Googling some strategies. I wouldn't say I've been speaking with people that might increase anxiety. I've been Googling some strategies that might help. And just to let you know that there's these websites which will be of use, and there's these breathing exercises. Just to let you know, I'm here to listen. You might want to write me a note, you might want to text me, and just the little check-ins over time, the little texts throughout the course of the day. Doesn't even have to be a text, it can just be an emoji heart, it can just be a emoji smiley face, just the little connections each day, because really you don't know what's going on. All you can do is read the signs, and it's pointless to guess about what's going on. But what you're reading as a parent is, I feel worried, I feel anxious, I feel down, I feel blue. You don't know about what. And because you haven't got that information, it's recognizing that that's causing probably a frustration for you as a parent. What can I do with it? all you can do at that bit is make sure that they know they're loved, and that so there's a resilient, a protective factor there of, I'm ready to listen, I love you, I care for you. It doesn't just have to be words. It can just be, I bought you your favourite meal today because I noticed you feel a bit tired, so I've got you some whatever that may be. And I was always thinking of you today at work, and I thought she might like this. You might get a shrug of the shoulders and a dismissive tone, but it is what it is at that point in time. And it's just rolling with those waves, but recognizing in yourself as a parent, you might be like, I'm trying my best here and I'm getting nothing back. But that's not unusual, and that's not uncommon, and that's not about you. That's about, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to say. I don't know if I'm going to be judged. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. Thank you. And I really, really like the idea that sometimes not talking is the right approach, because forcing our children and young people to talk is not the right way to go. Thank you very, very much, Jude, for those brilliant answers to questions that we just flung at you. It's just coming up for 8:45, and I think I'm going to draw the session to a close. I'm conscious that there were some questions that we've not been able to pick up. There was a question around the impact of divorce on children. There was also a question around what we can do when we feel that school themselves is the source of stress for our children. With Jude's okay, I think we've just got a couple of questions that we'll just follow up with you, which Jude's very kindly said it's okay for us to do. So just to reassure you, colleagues, we will absolutely make sure you get a copy of the recording and of the slides, and we'll also pick up the questions that we've not been able to deal with tonight. Just to say thank you so much to Jude Jockin. I thought that was just an amazing session and really helpful, and thank you so much. You know, ultimately, we want to see that our members and their families get the support they need to ensure good mental health for everyone, whatever anyone's background, wherever they live, whatever their class, wherever they work. And I think your commitment to that as well, Jude, has just absolutely shone through. So thank you so much for being here, every single one of you. And I really hope you found this session useful and practical and reassuring. And we'll make sure you get the recording. Thank you so much for your time. And keep in touch. There's loads going on around mental health in the union, and if you want to find out any more, please do feel free to get in touch. Thank you, everybody, and we'll end the webinar there. Thank you so much, Jude. Bye-bye now.
Thanks.
Bye.